When you're doing action photography and you let the camera think for you, you will get a technically adequate result. But who wants adequate? Take control of your photography when you're trying to shoot fast action shots and you will level up your work tremendously. And it's not all about camera settings. Later on in this video, I have a couple of tricks that will really help you do much better action photography, but it's not a camera setting. It's something you're actually going to have to learn and practice. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hayward here. The first thing I want to say is I am definitely not a sports and action photographer. Far from it. But that doesn't mean I don't have many occasions that I actually enjoy. It's a lot of fun to do action photography. As you may have seen from other videos I've done on this channel, I do a lot of portraits of high school seniors. High school seniors often are athletes or performers, and whatever it may be, they're at a stage, and the portrait we do for senior sessions is a portrait we want to capture what they're doing at this part of their lives. It's really important, and I have to do it well. I mean, this is a portrait that is going to be around for a long time. Whether it be ballet or sports or performance of any kind, the challenge is the same. The first thing I want to emphasize is that while you can choose shutter priority mode on your camera to capture action shots, what I want to talk about is the fact that it robs you of some creativity to actually excel and do this kind of photography well. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. What exactly is shutter priority mode? Shutter priority mode is a semi-automatic mode on your camera where you set the shutter speed you want to shoot at, and the camera will arrive at an exposure using f-stop and or ISO to get there. Basically it's saying, okay, I want to work at 1/300th of a second and give me a good exposure at that. The camera will say, okay, that's going to be f4, f5, and it's going to be at ISO 300, whatever. Some cameras just vary the f-stop, some cameras vary both, and some cameras have both ways to do it. At the end of the day, the camera is determining how to get at a good exposure using the shutter speed that you have chosen. Okay, well, shutter priority sounds pretty good, and it is really good in one sense that it can arrive at a good exposure pretty much as fast as you can shoot. That's the upside. But what's the problem with it? Well, the most glaring problem, especially for me, is that it takes away my decision-making process about depth of field because it's controlling the f-stop. When you're shooting action, that can really impact your focus too, because if the camera chooses an f-stop that's too shallow, a lot of your shots, you're gonna miss focus because the subject's moving, right? The camera's gonna grab focus and the subject is in a different spot by the time it actually fires. Yeah, the camera's quick, but fast-moving subjects are a lot quicker. And you're also giving up the decision of how your shot looks, the depth of field that you want, how much background blur, etc. You're giving that up. The camera is making that choice. I'm challenging you, even if you're just an amateur, raise your photography up and be discriminating. Make all the choices yourself. Okay, one more problem with it, as I mentioned, is some cameras will vary, or some cameras or some modes will also change the ISO. Well, that's an image quality decision that, again, I'm not willing to give up because most of my work goes to print. I'm not willing to all of a sudden see noise creep into some shots where there shouldn't have been any. Giving up control of ISO is possibly giving up control of your image quality. Okay, so what's the solution, or what's the alternative to shutter priority mode? There's a couple of parts to the answer to that. One is how to set the camera, and the other is how to set the photographer. And I'm gonna go through the camera settings first. It's very straightforward and simple. And then the second part is something you're gonna have to learn and practice, but it will make your action photography just stand above just that extra amount. if you put in the time to practice. Okay, here's the setup. Let's go through it. First, it's pretty plain vanilla. You're gonna shoot in fully manual mode, and you're going to make choices. What kind of depth of field do you want, meaning what f-stop? And you have to take into account focus. You've got to be able to get focus of a fast-moving subject, ISO, and shutter speed. It's going to take a little practice to set the shutter speed. For most of the kind of work I do, like I mentioned with high school seniors, I'm working in the 1/200th range unless they're really moving at full speed. For most running, jumping, and such, 1/200th works well. And a lot of photographers are going to hit me in the comments going, no way, you're going to get blur at 200. See my trick coming up after this setup. It makes a difference. Part 2, optionally, is you can add a high-speed flash supplement to your exposure. This is a large discussion on how to do this, but the idea is, the basic principle is that a high-speed flash is a very quick duration, and if it's the last little bit of your exposure, it will sharpen the subject because its duration is so quick. There's a caveat to this, is that you can't shoot faster than your camera's sync speed. So it may not work for every situation, and you have to keep an eye on the maximum sync speed of your camera. If you are doing very high speed action photography that has to freeze something that's moving very fast, that's not going to work. There are high-speed flash techniques that I don't usually use for the kind of work I do. It's out there, have a look at it. If you're using a human, like I am with high school seniors who may be running, jumping, something like that, just a little pop of flash at the right moment that I'm about to talk about will really just sharpen that action moment up. Just that little extra bit that'll make it look great. All right, that was the easy part. Now you have to go to work. For this section, I'm going to talk about 2 different kinds of action photography. One I used to do a little bit of years ago that I don't really do anymore, and the other that I do probably 3 or 4 times a month right now. If you have high-speed continuous action, like a race car moving or a football player running down the field that you can actually follow the whole way, the trick to this is your reflexes. You have to pan and follow the action so that the thing that's actually moving fast, whether it's a person or a car, is centered in your camera lens. So there's no relative motion to your camera. Your camera doesn't see that as motion. It will see the background as motion. And that will simultaneously freeze the subject and show the motion. It's a very dramatic shot. I'm going to show a couple of stills here. I didn't shoot these, but these are stock photos of what I'm talking about. It's quite beautiful. Action photographers who shoot race cars do this all the time, and there is, sorry, no substitute for their ability to pan with that action. That's why these guys are highly paid professionals. You have to actually feel it coming, see it coming, and then follow it. There's no shortcut, I'm sorry, but the results, they're gorgeous. Now let me talk about the kind of action I do. That is, like I said earlier, one of my subjects running, jumping, throwing, something like that. In all of these motions, there's an arc, okay? And in that arc, if you think about it, let's take this image of Peyton jumping. There's a moment at the apex of his jump that is motionless, and you have to release your shutter at that moment. It's not easy, and it's going to take some reflex. Not only is it going to take reflexes, you have to actually instinctively be able to feel the shutter lag between your shutter and when it shoots. And there is no way to learn that other than practice. I'm sorry. But once you learn it, you can freeze that action every single time. You must practice this a lot. Just like the previous example, there is no substitute for great action photography but practice and knowing that there is that moment where if you trip the shutter at that moment and like I said, you can use supplemental flash under sync speed. The subject's not actually moving at that moment. There is no movement. The movement is in your head and your finger to get that moment. If you practice this, you will be able to get photography that no one will expect you to be able to get. My subjects, these kids who I do this photography with, they're always amazed. And I'm like, how many more times can you jump? I can keep shooting. I'm having fun. You'll be tired, but I'm going to have great shots because I know what I'm trying to do and I know that there's a moment. That's being a photographer, right? It's not the camera driving, it's you creating great, compelling images. Let me say one other thing here. It's not always about perfectly freezing action as an artistic goal. Sometimes a little blur tells a better story. I'm going to show a quick shot here of Isabella. It was a session, she was on a rifle team or color guard or something like that, and she wanted to do a rifle toss. I thought to myself, and I actually did a couple where the rifle was frozen in the air, and it sort of looked kind of fake. And so I'm like, okay, maybe if I just slow it down just a hair, just to get a touch of blur, it sells it a little bit better. Just a touch of blur on the rifle shows that it's a high-speed move, right? It's not always one or the other, and it's definitely not mechanical. Work to not be mechanical in your photography. Be artistic, flow, feel the moment. Being able to find and utilize the decisive moment, as Bresson called it, and this iconic image here, that's the ball game. If you can do that, you are really on your road to mastering your photography. And I'm here for you for that. If you've got any comments about this video, questions, feedback, I'd love to hear it. I really appreciate you coming to the channel. If you haven't, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Until next time, cheers.